Hello everyone, welcome back to Biblio Fitness. Hope everyone is going to have a great day. I'm doing this quite early. Just had a glorious push session. Wasn't a perfect sesh, but I did try my best, and that's all that matters, right? So I just gotta admire the lightning person. Look at that pump. The pump is still there. That's what's the great thing about being in surplus. The pump stays. Yeah, the pump stays. Or my chest is actually getting bigger. But all right, enough mental masturbation onto the subject of today's video, if I haven't lost you already by that repulsive behavior. So I wanted to talk about what I've been reading quite recently about Nietzsche, and that's the concept of hell on earth and punishment. And I was talking about that earlier. I was thinking about that for a while yesterday. Like I had jury duty, and I was basically I basically got paid by my job to, sit in a room for 3 hours and read Nietzsche. That sounds like a win. But what he's been recently talking about in these last few, like what I was reading yesterday, is in regards to how we are so repulsed by violence inflicted onto other people, onto other creatures, and so on and so forth. You have this whole vegan movement. You have, and other ideologies like that. So, but we are constantly torturing and injuring and inflicting pain onto ourselves all the time. And if you aren't, then people think you're a stuck up, or you're a dickhead, or some shit like that. You're ignorant, or you're backwards if you're not torturing yourself consistently, And he talks about how it gets to the point where people start seeing visions and everything about heaven, because even the moral interpretations, right? There's no such thing as coincidence. There is no such thing as a misfortune being an opportunity for growth, maybe, or just a fucking coincidence. It doesn't have to mean anything. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to have a specific origin in regards to your narcissistic tendencies to think that everything revolves around you. It could just be part of what happens. It doesn't have to be for you. It doesn't have to be about you. It could just be. But no, everything has to be morally interpreted as a possible punishment. We are naturally sinful creatures. We naturally deviate from God. We naturally want to do things that are against God. It is a complete rejection of nature. So, and I know I keep talking about this all the time, but it's just so fucking crazy, bro. Like, it's so illogical. And it's clearly a fucking sign of serious resentment. How much hate do you have to have against your surroundings in order to construct this sort of bullshit? But he's really honing in on how everything is basically a punishment. How melancholic, how pessimistic, how sad being a Christian really is. There's this constant gloom hanging over your head. Everything has to be a possible punishment. Everything has to have meant something. If there was a great misfortune befalling upon your life, it had to have been your fault. You have had to have done something even worse in order to bring that upon you, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just ridiculous. But that's what I've been reading recently. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm getting stuck in my words. My apologies. But that's what I've been reading recently. And one of the aphorisms that I was talking about on my Instagram was in regards to the drop of blood. Because one thing that he really does talk about is the mercy of God being a reminder of that. And he talks about how, like, there's a sermon, I'm just gonna keep going with this, about the whole punishment thing, how everything is being conceived as a punishment, how nature in itself is evil, how everything that happens is evil. It's hell on earth. Earth is where just men get tortured to death. Bizarre, but that's really how it is. And we're constantly in fear, and there's really that a negative it's a negative philosophy, really. You know, it's a very pessimistic philosophy, and I love how he dives more and more into it. I really didn't see it that way. I wasn't able to, of course, but and lost my train of thought for 1 second. But yeah, okay. But he goes on to talk about how, you know, how everything is conceived or perceived as a possible punishment. And he talks about how there's a specific sermon or a specific pastor that there was an eyewitness that was talking about how the way that, how it really is that frustration and that anger and that resentment unleashed. It is evil on earth unleashed. When you see a man stomping on the ground and sweating and growling and screaming, you know, it's like constant torture. You're being tortured all the time with anxiety and with hate and anger, and everything is coming against you. And it really is like you're being tortured. And there's this exhibition of the suppressed violence, like in the book 1984, for example, the 5-minute hate or whatever, where they put on the screen and everyone's like, ah! Has to be this need of unleashing those instincts. And that's how they channel that, I suppose, that desperation, that resentment, all those terrible emotions have manifested themselves in that sort of way. People wailing and crying and gaining themselves unconscious. It just becomes this group energy thing going on. And it was really funny. I knew it was bullshit because I remember when I was like in 7th grade, bro. I remember I was in 7th grade and I went with some of my middle school classmates. I'm not gonna say they were friends. They were just, you know, classmates. And I ended up stumbled up with them at a service like for teenagers and a church that I used to go to. And they were having that moment, you know, that moment of everyone's just like unleashing all that suppressed emotion, all that emotion that has been called evil has now been vindicated in this environment. And it just becomes this mass hysteria, really, that becomes quite apparent, and people really become susceptible to that. A lot of people are weak, and a lot of people come into it already wanting to believe, already believing. Which is a very interesting point that Nietzsche talks about beyond good and evil, is that people who fall susceptible to these religions is because they wanted to in the first place. There was this need to believe in something like that, and that's why they ended up going, like, they ended up falling in it. And that's what is basically needed here. And so that's why they fall unconscious, because they were already expecting that. But so whatever, they were doing that, and people were, you know, the pastor puts the pastor puts his hand on the guys, you know, the people's forehead, and like, ah! And I'm so sorry. I sound like such a dick, but I'm just looking at it now, and I'm like, dude, we're fucking fools. We're such fools. Oh, give me a second. And I'm in 7th grade, dude. I'm like 11 years old. I'm like 11, 12 years old. And I'm just standing there like, what the fuck is going on here? I was like looking around. I'm like, I'm not really feeling it then. Why are people falling down? And then the thought came into my head. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to join the line and see if I fall. And I did it. Like, I literally stood there and he touched me. And I'm like, am I supposed to feel something? Like, it was quite interesting. I felt so out of place. Like, I even from that moment, that time, I was already like, something wrong here. But yeah, I just want, you know, I'm sorry that I broached upon that, but he taught, like Nietzsche in that example was this kind of the same thing, is this feeling of torture. And he's like, oh, hopefully, you know, one wonders that we'll be able to ever extirpate these statements from ourselves of, you know, my soul is damned, I'm destined for hell, you know, why did I have to be born, why did I have to have a soul, and so on and so forth. All these this really negative attitude towards life. It's quite nihilistic, really, right? It's quite astounding. the levels of analysis that this guy gets to, and I want to keep going with it, and with the whole coincidence thing, and how everything has to mean something. Everything has to be interpreted in a way to justify your religion. And one great point that he made before I stopped reading was the philology of Christianity and its dishonesty from the very beginning. How a lot of pastors say, I'm correct because it's written, but they interpret it in a way that is beneficial for them, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And he goes on to talk about how when Christianity started taking off in the beginning, they started trying to take credit for the Old Testament, saying that, everything that had to do with wood, a branch, a fig, a tree, or whatever, give me 1 second, had to signify the coming of Jesus Christ. And Moses praying in front of the ocean and all this other stuff. These were all allusions and prophecies for the coming of Jesus. So they're really trying to say like, oh no, you Jews are wrong. We're the true children of Israel. You guys took it without permission. They really try to distort it, and he talks about how when they were doing the first Greek translations of the Old Testament, they started throwing their own little interlopations, or their own little translations, their own little sayings into the Old Testament in order to later on say, hey, look, see, we were right. There's a certain dishonesty, and it goes back to one of the fundamental points of Nietzsche, and that is, to be the moral standing, you have to commit the most immoral acts. To be the lawgiver, you have to break the laws first in order to be the new lawgiver, the new lawmaker, I suppose. Very interesting observation that people don't talk about as well. It's so I'm really glad that I continue to read this. It's astounding to be able to understand all this, or be able to perceive these things. And I know I sound like a jittery old little kid, but it just all makes sense to me. That's why it's really resonating with me. It's like, fuck, why is this making so much freaking sense? I've always had this sort of inkling or little splinter in my mind, as Morpheus would say in the Matrix. But yeah, I guess that'll be all for today. I didn't know I was going to be able to put out so much information in about 13 minutes or so. You've been spared. I hope y'all have a great day. I hope y'all make tremendous gains. Get big as hell. And love y'all. Till next time. Peace.